In the distant reaches of the galaxy, the peaceful kingdom of Aetheris had long been known for its beauty, its advanced technology, and its thriving culture. Its people lived in harmony with the stars, and the princess Lyra was beloved by all. She was graceful, wise, and the future of Aetheris expected to bring even greater prosperity to the kingdom. But that peace was about to be shattered. The first sign of danger came without warning. A fleet of alien warships appeared in the sky, their sleek, menacing forms descending upon the planet like an uninvited storm. They were led by Lord Valdar, a cruel and calculating warlord from a distant empire that had conquered countless worlds. Aetheris had never faced an enemy like this before. Princess Lyra stood by the palace balcony, her gaze fixed upon the horizon where the dark shapes of Valdar's fleet loomed. The peaceful beauty of the sky was now marred by the presence of the invaders. As the ships lowered into the atmosphere, a sense of dread began to settle over the city. People gathered in the streets, whispering, uncertain of what would come next. The royal guards were quickly summoned, and the castle went into lockdown. But even with their strength and numbers, they were no match for the alien invaders. Valdar's army had come prepared with highly advanced weapons and technology that Aetheris had never seen. The city's defenses faltered quickly, and panic spread like wildfire. Princess Lyra, surrounded by her closest advisors, felt her heart race. She had been trained for diplomacy, for leadership, but never for this. The invasion of her home, the threat to her people. It was beyond anything she had ever imagined. She had to act, and act quickly, or all would be lost. As the city was overtaken, Lyra's royal guard rushed her to a hidden underground chamber beneath the palace. There she would be safe, protected until they could figure out a way to push the invaders back. But Lyra refused to hide. Her people were suffering above, and she could not simply stand by while they were enslaved. "Your Highness, please, it is not safe," her most trusted advisor, Captain Roland, begged as he tried to pull her away from the chamber's entrance. But Lyra stood firm, her eyes burning with determination. "I cannot hide while my people fight for their lives. They need me." Before Captain Roland could argue further, a loud explosion shook the palace, sending dust and debris falling from the ceiling. The ground beneath their feet trembled as the shockwave rattled the entire structure. Lyra's heart pounded in her chest as the reality of the invasion struck her. This wasn't just a battle. This was a war. "Get her to safety," Roland barked, and the guards around Lyra swiftly moved to escort her. But it was too late. The palace doors burst open, and a group of armored alien soldiers stormed into the chamber. Their glowing weapons hummed with a terrifying energy, and their cold, emotionless faces revealed nothing of the mercy they would show. Lyra's breath caught in her throat as she stared at the invaders. There was no time to think. The soldiers raised their weapons, but before they could fire, Roland and his men stepped forward, protecting her with their bodies. "No!" Lyra shouted, her voice rising in desperation. She couldn't bear to watch her people fall, not again, not so easily. In the chaos, she made a choice, a dangerous one. As the soldiers closed in, she made a mad dash toward the exit, slipping past the guards and sprinting down the narrow corridors of the palace. Her heart raced with fear, but she knew she had no other choice. She had to survive. She had to warn the people. But the palace had been breached. Alien soldiers filled the hallways, searching every corner, every room. Lyra ran, her footsteps echoing off the stone walls. She didn't know where she was going, only that she couldn't stop. The sound of distant gunfire and explosions was growing louder. In a blur, she turned a corner, and there, in the midst of the confusion, was a familiar face. Captain Roland had fallen, his body limp, his eyes wide with disbelief. The aliens had taken him down without mercy, and his death struck Lyra harder than she expected. He had been her protector, her friend. Now, he was gone. Tears stung her eyes, but she couldn't afford to mourn. Not yet. The palace was lost, but there was still hope. She had to keep fighting. Lyra managed to find a hidden passageway that led to the royal vault, a safe house deep beneath the palace. She entered the small chamber, locking the door behind her. But she knew it was only a matter of time before the aliens found it. There was no escaping them. She could hear them coming, their footsteps thundering against the stone floors. Breathing heavily, Lyra sank to her knees, her back against the cold, hard wall. In that moment, all she could think of was her people, her family, the kingdom she had sworn to protect. And yet, she could do nothing but wait. Wait for death, or perhaps something else. Outside, the warlords' forces were making their way through the city, crushing all resistance in their path. The sound of their invasion filled the air. It seemed as though all hope was lost. But what Lyra didn't know was that fate had a different plan for her. The sounds of destruction echoed through the palace as Princess Lyra huddled in the safe house. The pounding of alien boots on the stone floors grew louder. She pressed herself against the cold wall, breathing heavily, her heart racing. There was no escaping them now. She knew it was only a matter of time before the invaders found her. Suddenly, the door to the safe house trembled with a violent force. Lyra's eyes widened in fear. She scrambled to her feet, searching the small room for something, anything, that might help her defend herself. But there was nothing. The invaders had left her no options. She could hear their voices now, growing closer as they approached the chamber. She held her breath, praying that they might pass by. But the footsteps stopped outside the door. Then, an explosion rocked the building, followed by a series of loud crashes. The ground beneath Lyra's feet shook violently, and the air around her seemed to grow thick with the sounds of battle. She knew what was happening. There was a fight outside. Her heart skipped a beat. This could be her chance. The alien soldiers, outside, shouted orders to one another, their voices gruff and unintelligible. The sounds of metal scraping against metal, the hum of weapons charging, and the heavy thud of boots told her that they were preparing for something big. Lyra's hand instinctively reached for her hidden knife, a blade she had kept with her for moments like this. It wasn't much, but it was all she had. She glanced toward the door, knowing she would need to be quick if she was going to survive. Suddenly, a loud crash shattered the door to the safe house. Lyra instinctively recoiled, her heart pounding in her chest. But when the dust settled, she saw something that made her freeze in disbelief. A man stood in the doorway, dressed in armor that was strange but not unfamiliar. The suit was well-worn, battle-scarred, and it had a rugged quality to it. He was human. His skin was pale, and his short dark hair was messy from the fight. His eyes, though, were calm, focused, and sharp. He held a weapon, an unfamiliar blade. But it was not a typical weapon of war. This was something different. The man stepped into the safe house, his movements fluid and precise, like a predator on the prowl. His eyes swept the room, and when they landed on Lyra, his expression softened just slightly. "Are you all right?" His voice was calm, though there was an edge of urgency to it. "We don't have much time." Lyra stared at him, her mind racing. She had heard stories about humans, stories of their stubbornness, their resilience, and their unyielding determination. But those were only stories. She had never seen one in person, and certainly never imagined one would come to her rescue. I'm fine," she managed to say, though her voice trembled slightly. "Who are you?" The man gave a half-smile, though it was faint. "Name's Roderick. I'm not here for the introductions, Princess. I'm here to get you out of here." Lyra took a step back, still unsure of this unexpected savior. "You're human," she said, as if stating the obvious. Roderick nodded. "That's right. A human with a job to do. But how?" Lyra trailed off, unable to finish her thought. How could a human, One of the lesser species be here, in the heart of an alien invasion, rescuing her. Roderick's eyes glinted with something close to amusement. Not all humans are as weak as the stories make us out to be, Princess. Sometimes strength comes in unexpected packages. Before she could respond, the sound of distant explosions and shouting grew louder. The enemies were closing in. Roderick didn't waste any more time. He motioned for Lara to follow him. Come on, we don't have time for questions right now. If we don't move fast, we'll both be captured. Lara hesitated for only a moment before nodding. With Roderick leading the way, they ran through the narrow corridors of the palace. The distant sounds of alien soldiers grew louder as they moved swiftly, keeping to the shadows. Roderick's movements were sure and confident, as if he knew exactly where he was going. Lara tried to keep up, though she had to admit that the human warrior's speed and agility were far beyond her expectations. As they reached an intersection, Roderick stopped abruptly, signaling for her to be quiet. Lara froze, listening closely. There were more soldiers up ahead, their voices unmistakable. Roderick motioned for Lara to stay low as he moved silently forward. He crept past the corner and disappeared from sight. Lara held her breath, waiting for a signal. She didn't know how he did it, but in a matter of moments, Roderick reappeared, a fierce look on his face. They're distracted. Now's our chance. Come on. Lara followed him quickly, her heart still racing. She couldn't believe what was happening. A human, of all things, was leading her to safety. It made no sense, and yet there was no denying the sense of security she felt with him at her side. There was something about Roderick, a quiet strength, a focused determination that she couldn't help but trust. They reached the palace's lower levels, where a secret exit was hidden beneath the castle's foundations. Roderick's hand found a lever, and with a sharp pull, a hidden door creaked open. Beyond it was a narrow, dimly lit tunnel. Through here, Roderick instructed. We're not out of danger yet, but this will get us to the ship. Lara glanced back at the palace, the symbol of her family's reign now under siege. She could feel her heart breaking, but she knew there was no time to dwell on that. She needed to survive. She needed to warn the people. With Roderick's help, she moved quickly through the tunnel. The sounds of the invaders' pursuit seemed to fade, but only slightly. They were still after her. As they reached the end of the tunnel, Roderick stopped and turned to her. Stay close, he said quietly. We're almost there. Lara nodded, her mind still racing with questions. Who was this human? Why was he here? And how had he become so skilled in fighting these invaders? But for now, there were no answers, only survival. The ship rocked gently as Roderick expertly steered them toward their destination, a remote, hidden corner of the galaxy. The stars outside the window were vast, endless, and cold, just like the silence inside the cockpit. Lara sat silently, her mind racing with questions, her heart still reeling from everything that had happened in the past few hours. She had only known Roderick for a short time, but already she was beginning to realize that he was no ordinary human. There was something about him, something that made him different from the stories she had heard about humans. The same humans who were considered weak, insignificant compared to the vast empires that ruled the galaxy. Yet here was Roderick, saving her life, fighting for her kingdom, and guiding her through the unknown. How could someone like him possess such strength, such determination? Lara turned to face him. You've been quiet. How are you holding up? Roderick didn't look away from the ship's controls, his hands moving expertly across the panel. I've seen worse, he said simply, his tone calm. It's not the first time I've been in a situation like this. Lara raised an eyebrow, intrigued. What do you mean? Roderick paused for a moment, then gave a small shrug. I've been fighting for a long time. Not for a kingdom, but for survival. That's all we really have in this galaxy. Survival. Lyra sat back in her seat, contemplating his words. "I've never had to fight for survival before," she admitted. "I was always sheltered, always protected. But now I'm not sure what's next." Roderick finally turned his gaze to her, his expression unreadable. "What's next is up to you, Princess." Lyra shifted uncomfortably in her seat. She didn't feel like a princess anymore. A princess was a symbol of strength, of power, of leadership. She had been trained to rule, to guide her people, but now she was just a fugitive, hiding from an enemy that had wiped out her world. "I don't know if I can do this," she said quietly, more to herself than to Roderick. "I don't know if I'm the leader they need. I don't know if I can fight." Roderick's eyes softened, though his face remained serious. "You don't have to be a warrior to be a leader. You just need to lead with purpose. You've got something they need, Lyra. Your people need you." Lyra swallowed, a lump forming in her throat. "But they're gone. My people, my family. Everything. I knew. It's all gone." For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The silence between them was heavy, filled with unspoken words. Finally, Roderick broke the stillness. "You don't have to do it alone," he said, his voice quiet but firm. "I'm here, and there are others who will fight with you. You just need to trust them, and trust yourself." Lyra looked at him, her eyes searching his face for any sign of doubt. But there was none. He believed in her. Despite everything that had happened, he still believed in her. She nodded slowly, a spark of something inside her beginning to flicker, a sense of determination she hadn't felt before. "All right," she said, her voice steadier than before. "I'll do it. I'll lead. But we need to stop Valdar. We need to take back what's ours." Roderick smiled, a small, approving gesture. "That's the spirit, and we'll do it together." The ship traveled faster through the galaxy, the stars outside growing into streaks of light as they entered a faster-than-light jump. The journey was long, and the weight of what they were about to do was never far from Lyra's mind. But as the hours passed, she found herself thinking less about the destruction of her home and more about the future she would fight for, alongside Roderick. As the ship slowed, Roderick's voice broke her thoughts. "We're almost there." Lyra looked up, seeing a small, unmarked planet ahead. Its surface was a dark shade of green, with patches of land and water barely visible from their distance. "This is it?" she asked, raising an eyebrow. Roderick nodded. "This is the rebel base. They've been hiding out here for years, building up their forces. We're going to meet some old friends, and we're going to need all the help we can get." Lyra felt a flutter of nerves in her stomach, but she pushed it down. This was the first step toward regaining her kingdom. She had no choice but to be strong. The ship descended through the planet's atmosphere, the surface growing larger as they neared the ground. The landscape was barren, save for a few scattered structures in the distance. As the ship touched down in a secluded area, Lyra couldn't help but wonder about the people they were about to meet. She had been raised in luxury, surrounded by servants and advisors, but this was different. This was a group of rebels, fighting not for riches or power, but for survival. They weren't wealthy. They weren't kings or queens. They were just people who had been pushed too far and refused to bow down. Lyra stepped out of the ship, her boots crunching against the dry ground. Roderick was already ahead of her, walking toward a group of figures standing near a large metal building. Their eyes turned to her as she approached, their faces unreadable. Roderick waved them forward. "This is Princess Lyra," he said, his voice loud enough for them all to hear. "She's come to join the fight. She's one of us now." The group exchanged glances, but Lyra could sense no hesitation in their eyes. They were ready for this fight. They didn't care that she was a princess. They cared about one thing: stopping Valdar. A tall man, his face weathered with age and battle, stepped forward. "Welcome to the rebellion, Princess. You've got a lot of work ahead of you." Lyra nodded, her heart pounding with a mixture of fear and excitement. But as she looked at the faces around her, she knew one thing was certain. She wasn't alone anymore. She had an army, a team, and a purpose, and together they would stop Valdar. Lyra followed closely behind Roderick as they moved through the dark, twisting corridors beneath the palace. The tunnel's cold walls seemed to press in on her, but she couldn't stop now. Not when freedom was so close. The air was thick with tension, and every step they took echoed in the silence. They had almost made it to the secret escape vessel when the sound of alien footsteps reached their ears. Too close, too fast. Roderick halted immediately, his hand gripping Lyra's arm firmly, pulling her into the shadows. Lyra's heart raced. She could feel her breath catch in her throat. The soldiers were close, and if they were spotted now, everything would be lost. They had no more tricks to play, no more time to waste. Roderick leaned down, his voice barely a whisper. "Stay quiet and stay close. Do exactly as I say, and we'll make it." Lyra nodded, though her stomach churned. She had never felt so out of control, so vulnerable. In the past, she had been a princess, a symbol of power and grace. Now she was nothing but a target, a prize for the invaders. Suddenly, Roderick stepped forward, his movements swift and calculated. He crouched low to the ground and peered around the corner. The soft hum of alien voices came closer, followed by the sharp clatter of their boots against the stone floor. Lyra pressed herself against the wall, hoping they wouldn't be spotted. They were only a few yards away from the exit, an old, hidden door that led to a small underground docking bay where the royal escape ships were kept. But the soldiers were patrolling the area, making it impossible to slip by unnoticed. Roderick's eyes met hers, and for a brief moment, the weight of the situation hung between them. "When I give the signal, run. Don't stop for anything." Lyra nodded, though her legs felt heavy, as if the weight of the entire kingdom rested on her shoulders. The soldiers were nearly upon them now, and she had no choice but to trust Roderick. He had led her this far. She had no reason to doubt him. Without another word, Roderick sprang into action, moving with a speed and precision that left Lyra in awe. He darted from the shadows, rushing toward the first soldier with a surprising strength. The soldier barely had time to react before Roderick was on him, knocking him out with a swift strike to the neck. Lyra's breath caught in her throat, but there was no time to be afraid. The rest of the soldiers were still unaware, distracted by the noise of the struggle. Roderick pulled Lyra to her feet, his eyes scanning the area. "Now," he hissed. Without thinking, Lyra ran. She moved as fast as she could, her feet pounding against the stone floor. The sound of her own footsteps seemed deafening, but she didn't dare stop. The soldiers were shouting now, alert to the escape. Their voices grew louder, and she knew they were close behind. Roderick was beside her in an instant, pushing her forward as he kept glancing over his shoulder. He grabbed the door handle, twisting it with ease, and the door creaked open. The hidden docking bay stood before them. A single escape ship sat in the center of the room, its engines idling, ready. "For launch! Get in!" Roderick barked. Lyra didn't hesitate. She rushed toward the ship, climbing into the cockpit as Roderick followed closely behind. He sealed the door shut behind them, and the ship's engines roared to life. But as Roderick powered up the ship, the sound of alien soldiers echoed through the docking bay. They were too late. The soldiers had caught up. Lyra glanced at Roderick, fear creeping into her chest. "What now?" Roderick didn't look at her as he punched in the launch coordinates, his hands moving with practiced ease. "Now, we run." With A press of a button, the ship shot into the air, blasting through the hidden tunnel and emerging into the sky above Etheris. The palace, her home, was now a distant memory, swallowed by the darkness of the night. But the danger wasn't over. The alien fleet still hovered above, waiting for any opportunity to strike. Lyra's heart pounded as she watched the glowing ships in the distance. She didn't know where they were headed, or if they would be safe once they left the planet's atmosphere. Roderick glanced at her, his face set in determination. "We'll make it. We just have to get out of their range." Lyra nodded, though her thoughts were racing. The battle for her kingdom was far from over, but at least for now they were free. The escape ship soared into the stars, leaving behind the wreckage of Etheris and the shadows of her past. The unknown stretched out before them, a vast, endless expanse of space. But for the first time since the invasion began, Lyra felt a small sense of hope. She had survived, and with Roderick's help, she had escaped. They still had a long way to go, but maybe, just maybe, they could fight back. The escape ship shot through the stars, its engines humming softly as it left the burning world of Etheris behind. The distant lights of the planet's surface faded into the black void of space, swallowed by the vastness of the galaxy. Princess, Lyra sat silently in the cockpit, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. The events of the past few hours felt like a blur, her kingdom falling, the desperate chase through the palace, and now the journey into the unknown. She didn't know where they were headed or what awaited them. All she knew was that she was no longer a princess of a thriving kingdom. She was a fugitive, running from an enemy she didn't fully understand. Roderick sat at the controls, his eyes focused on the star maps in front of him. He seemed calm, composed, his fingers moving with precision as he navigated the ship's course. It was clear that he had been in situations like this before: danger, escape, survival. Lyra, on the other hand, felt like a stranger in this world, of constant motion and uncertainty. "Where are we going?" Lyra asked, breaking the silence. Roderick glanced over at her, his expression unreadable. "We're heading to a safe zone, an old rebel base in the outer reaches of the galaxy. It's not far, but we need to stay off the radar for a while. The enemy will be looking for us." Lyra nodded slowly, though doubt lingered in her mind. How could a small rebel base possibly protect them against the might of Valdar's forces? The warlord had fleets at his command, and he was relentless in his pursuit. "Will they be able to help us?" Lyra asked, her voice trembling slightly. "Will we be safe there?" Roderick didn't answer immediately. Instead, he adjusted the ship's course, bringing them out of the gravitational pull of a nearby planet. The stars stretched out before them, infinite and cold. Finally, he spoke, his voice quiet but firm. "They'll help us. If there's anyone who knows how to fight back against Valdar, it's them. We have allies, people who've been fighting, the invaders for years. They know what to do." Lyra looked at him, studying his face for any sign of doubt. But Roderick's eyes were steady, filled with a quiet confidence that she couldn't ignore. Despite everything that had happened, despite the loss of her kingdom and the weight of the galaxy's future hanging over them, Roderick seemed sure of one thing. There was hope. Lyra leaned back in her seat, closing her eyes for a moment. She was exhausted, physically and emotionally. Her thoughts kept returning to her people, to the friends and family she had left behind. The royal palace had been destroyed, the capital overrun. And now it seemed that her home, Etheris, was lost. She couldn't allow herself to dwell on it. Not yet. There was still work to be done. "How long will it take to get there?" she asked, her voice soft. "About a day," Roderick answered. "But we'll have to make some detours along the way to avoid enemy ships. We can't afford to be seen." Lyra nodded again, her eyes still closed. There was so much uncertainty ahead of them, but she had to believe that Roderick was right. They had to keep going. They had to fight back. The hours passed in silence, the ship gliding smoothly through the darkness of space. Lyra occasionally glanced out the cockpit window, her mind wandering to thoughts of Etheris. What had happened to the people she loved? Was anyone left to carry on the fight? Would she ever be able to return home? Suddenly, the stillness of the ship was broken by a sharp beep from the control panel. Roderick's hand flew to the console, his eyes narrowing as he examined the incoming signal. "Looks like we've got company," he muttered under his breath. Lyra's heart skipped a beat. "What do we do?" Roderick's fingers moved quickly, adjusting the ship's course and activating the ship's cloaking system. "We hide. If we can't outrun them, we'll at least make sure they can't find us." Lyra's stomach tightened. As the ship slowed down, the hum of the engines fading to a whisper. They were drifting now, hiding in the empty space between two asteroids, hoping to remain undetected. Lyra held her breath, her eyes fixed on Roderick as he continued to monitor the enemy ships on the scanner. The minutes felt like hours. Every sound in the ship seemed magnified. Every creak of the metal and every small noise from the engines felt like a warning. The tension was suffocating. Finally, Roderick spoke. "They've passed us. We're in the clear. For now." Lyra let out a long breath, relieved but still on edge. The chase wasn't over. It never would be until they were truly safe. "Thank you," she said quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. "For everything. I don't know what I would have done without you." Roderick glanced over at her, his face softening for just a moment. "You would have found a way," he said. "You're stronger than you know." Lyra wasn't sure if she believed him, but his words brought her some comfort. Roderick had been right about one thing. He wasn't just a human mercenary. He was a fighter, and he had given her hope when she had none left. As the ship continued its journey through the dark expanse of space, Lyra made a silent promise to herself. She would not let her kingdom fall. She would not let Valdar destroy everything she had ever known. She had a new purpose now, to rebuild, to fight, and to take back what had been stolen from her. She glanced at Roderick again, who was back at the controls, guiding the ship through the unknown. For the first time since the invasion, Lyra felt the flicker of determination in her heart. They weren't just surviving anymore. They were fighting back. The escape ship glided silently through the stars, its engines purring softly as Roderick skillfully navigated through the vastness of space. Lyra sat in the cockpit, her gaze fixed on the dark expanse beyond the windows. The events of the past. Few days had been a whirlwind, and though they were now far from Etheris, the weight of what she had lost still pressed heavily on her heart. "I never imagined it would come to this," Lyra said softly, breaking the silence that had hung between them for hours. Roderick's eyes flicked over to her briefly. "None of us do. But this is the reality now. We do what we have to in order to survive, and then we fight back." Lyra turned her eyes back to the stars. She hadn't asked Roderick much about his past, and he hadn't volunteered much information. She knew he was a soldier, a mercenary, someone who had fought in battles across the galaxy. But his words were always calm, measured, as though he had seen more than his fair share of war and loss. He was used to the fight, but she wasn't. She had never expected to be leading a resistance. "How do we start?" Lyra asked quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. Roderick took a deep breath, his fingers tapping lightly against the ship's console as he set a new course. "First, we reach the base. Once we're there, we'll get in contact with the right people. There's a rebellion growing. It's not just about one planet anymore. It's about the whole galaxy." Lyra nodded, though a part of her wasn't sure if she was ready to take on such a large responsibility. Her entire world had been centered around peace, prosperity, and diplomacy. She had been trained to rule with wisdom and grace, to protect her people with honor. But now, it was different. Now she was a symbol of resistance, a figurehead for a cause far larger than herself. "Do you think they'll help us?" she asked, her voice full of uncertainty. "They have no choice," Roderick said with a small, confident grin. "Valdar has been conquering worlds for years. His empire is built on fear. We can't stop him by sitting back. We fight. And if we're smart, we can make it hurt." Lara turned to look at him. His eyes were filled with a fire she hadn't expected to see in someone so hardened. He was more than just a mercenary. He was a fighter, someone who had a purpose, someone who believed in what he was doing. "I didn't ask for this," Lyra whispered, the weight of her situation settling over her like a heavy cloak. "I didn't want to be a leader in a war." "No one ever does," Roderick said, his voice soft but firm. "But sometimes life doesn't give you a choice. You either fight or you die. And if you want to protect those you love, you fight." Lyra nodded, her fingers gripping the edge of her seat as the ship picked up speed. She knew Roderick was right, even though it scared her. She wasn't the warrior he was. She wasn't like him, but she had to be. For her people. For Etheris. As the ship continued its journey, Lyra's thoughts drifted back to her kingdom. Etheris had been beautiful, a planet of lush forests, towering cities, and crystal-clear waters. It had been a place of peace, a beacon in the galaxy where people from all walks of life lived in harmony. Now it was gone. Her people were scattered. Her home was in ruins, but the war wasn't over. Not yet. Roderick's voice broke her thoughts. "We're approaching the base. Get ready." Lyra straightened in her seat, suddenly aware of the gravity of the moment. This would be the turning point. This would be where their real fight began. As the ship descended toward the hidden rebel base, she felt a strange sense of anticipation, an unfamiliar feeling, one she had never known before. The ship landed with a soft thud, the landing gear touching down on the rough surface of an asteroid. Roderick powered down the engines, and for a moment, there was only silence. Lara took a deep breath, stepping out of the ship and onto the cold, rocky ground. The base was small, hidden within the craters of an uninhabited asteroid. But there was an undeniable energy in the air. People moved around, preparing for something, their expressions grim but resolute. Roderick motioned for Lara to follow him as they approached a small command center. Inside, a group of rebels was gathered around a table, speaking in low voices. As they entered, their conversations stopped, and all eyes turned to them. "This is Princess Lyra of Etheris," Roderick said, his tone confident. "We need your help." The room was silent for a long moment. Then a tall, older woman with a scar over her left eye stepped forward. Her gaze was piercing, and there was an air of authority about her. "We've heard of you," she said, her voice steady. "Etheris was one of the last peaceful planets, and now it's fallen. What's left of your people?" Lara swallowed, her throat tight with emotion. "I don't know, but I'm here now, and I'll do whatever it takes to stop Valdar." The woman studied her for a moment longer, then nodded. "You've come to the right place. We've been fighting this war for years, and we will fight alongside you. But this isn't just about your planet anymore, Princess. It's about the galaxy." Lara felt a wave of relief wash over her, but it was tempered by the realization of what they were up against. They had just begun, and the road ahead would be long and hard. But for the first time since the invasion, Lara felt something she hadn't felt in a long time: hope. They had a chance, and together they would make Valdar regret ever crossing them.